Welcome to my organism project by Caleb Arendt. This is Mark 4 or 5, I think, because the other ones didn't have audio. Hopefully this one does. The first organism we have is Disulphococcus, with the kingdom Archaea, genus Disulphococcus, and species Disulphococcus animalyticus. I am not going to read the whole taxonomy because I can't read most of it. Very hard to read. It is a single-celled organism. It is a prokaryote, and it is an autotroph through chemical synthesis as it gets its food from processing very hot water from sea vents, both at the bottom of the ocean and in places like Yellowstone. Wait, is that the name of the place? Like hot water springs. It has a lattice-like protein structure for a cell wall. The cells are spherical, size of about 0.5 to 15 microns. It is an asexual organism, and it is unique due to resistance to high temperatures. I mean, you gotta have that if your food is based on hot water. Our second organism is Bordetella pertussis of kingdom Bacteria, and the genus Bordetella pertussis. Its common name, instead of Bordetella pertussis, is whooping cough. It is a single-celled organism, asexual, prokaryote, heterotroph, and it is lethal for humans and is extremely dangerous in infants, as it can do a lot of harm to a baby's respiratory system. Third organism is Dictyostelium of kingdom Protista and genus Dictyostelium and Dictyostelium discoideum. In specifics, it is a eukaryote, is a multicellular multicellular and single-cellular. Its traditional name is slime mold, and why it is, normally it is a single-cellular organism. It can function just fine by itself, but sometimes under special conditions, it can group together with other Dictyostelium to form a multicellular group of up to 100,000 cells that will coordinate together like a multicellular organism. It's very interesting. It is like fungi, but scientists have included in Protista. It is a heterotroph as it eats bacteria. Sexual production to form diploid cell, and that is called the heterothallic mating. Our fourth organism is Nutesia floribunda. It is of the plant kingdom, and it is Nutesia floribunda. Its common name is the Australian Christmas tree. It is found in Western Australia. You can't be an Australian Christmas tree if you're not in Australia. Logic. It blooms between October and January. It is an autotroph, and it gets its food through photosynthesis. It's interesting because its seeds have 4 to 6 cotyledons rather than 2. It undergoes sexual reproduction. The guy sends out the pollen, meets the flower, that kind of. And then bark was historically used by the Nunyangar people to make shields. The Nunyangards were historic native peoples of Australia before the British came. Okay. Our fifth organism is Candida auris of the fungus kingdom, and it's Candida auris. It grows as a type of yeast. It can cause candidiasis in humans, and it affects the bloodstream, central nervous system, and other internal organs. I don't know why it says organisms. Interesting. It is resistant to a lot of commonly used drugs, which makes treatment very complicated because you got to pull out some high-end stuff to beat this guy. It is multicellular. It is a eukaryote, and it undergoes sexual reproduction. Next. And then last, but definitely my favorite, the Ornithorhynchus anatinus. Yeah, I'm probably saying that wrong. Kingdom Animalia. And it is, you can see in the picture, guess what it looks like? A platypus. Yeah, it's the platypus. It is semi-aquatic. It is egg-laying, which is very interesting for a mammal. Mammals usually give birth to their young. It undergoes sexual reproduction, and it is native to Australia and Tasmania. It is also interesting as a mammal because it is one of the very few venomous mammals. It has a spur on the hind foot that can cause severe pain to humans, kind of like being stung by a bee. You don't want that thing to hurt you. It is a multicellular organism. It's not that small, and it is a eukaryote. And a fun fact about the name, platypus is the Latinization form of the Greek word platypus something, which means flat-footed. And also, there is no agreed-upon plural noun in the English language for platypus. I mean, some people say platypi, I prefer that. Some people say platypuses, some people say I don't even know. Yeah. Then we have my cladogram that links all of these wonderful organisms. For first, we have the Bordetella leaving the cladogram because Bordetella, as an organism, is very dependent on hurting its host in a parasitic way as a way to gain food and other supplies. And, Dulcophococcus is a autotroph, and it gets its food from, hot water vents. It doesn't need to be a parasite. But I separated that from the rest of everyone because everyone else has multicellular capabilities. Dictosium even though it isn't a strict multicellular organism, it can become one, and so, it is a step along the way. This does show an evolutionary trend that shows single-celled organisms transitioning into a more multicellular fashion, and this could be very interesting for microbiologists to study, as they look back in history and see how we all evolved. I ended up separating that from just fully multicellular organisms, including the Candida fungus and the Nutesia Christmas tree and the platypus. Unlike the Nutesia and the platypus, the Candida does have a less complex, less definitive structure. Candida, you show a random person a picture of it on the street, it looks like a microorganism. You can't really tell what it is. Sure, it has a specialized proteins and specialized, proteins, but it's not very a definitive structure, and it's not very complex. Whereas in Nutesia, you can look at that, even if you don't know what the exact name of the even if you don't know if it's an Australian Christmas tree, you can look at a Nutesia tree and say, that's a tree. You can look at a platypus and say, I might not know what a platypus is. You should if you've ever watched, Phineas and Ferb, but, you look at a platypus and you say, that's an animal. And I separated Nutesia from a platypus because unlike a static kind of, I wouldn't say never moving, but kind of rigid plant tree, a platypus is a warm-blooded mammal that can move around and has more control over its environment. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.